A spine snapped, a life shattered. But what happened next will leave you breathless. From a broken bride discarded like trash to a queen who crushed an empire with fire and iron, this is the story of unstoppable revenge and unbreakable strength. Watch until the very end. The city of Gwandara had never seen a wedding so grand. Streets were decorated with gold banners, and nobles from distant lands gathered. Everyone was talking about it. The cold, powerful Prince Okuta was marrying a simple village girl named Nasiha. People couldn't stop whispering. She's beautiful, yes, but she's nobody. No title, no riches. Why her? Some said it was love. Others said it was just another one of Okuta's games. But Nasiha believed in it. She thought behind his hard eyes was a man waiting to be understood. She thought love would soften him. She thought kindness could heal him. She walked down the aisle smiling, dressed in silk and gold, her heart full of hope. The crowd cheered, the drums shook the ground, and the air was heavy with perfume and pride. It looked like a fairy tale, but the dream ended the moment the doors of the palace closed behind them. Inside, the prince's mask dropped. Okuta stared at her like she was nothing. "You are not my queen," he said coldly. "You're mine to control." Nasiha froze. Before she could speak, he grabbed her. What happened next was beyond cruelty. In one brutal moment, he pushed her down and twisted her spine with force no human heart could understand. Her screams were muffled by the thick palace walls. No one heard. No one came. He stood over her and called it discipline. To him, it was his right. To her, it was the end of everything. By sunrise, Nasiha couldn't feel her legs. She couldn't sit. She couldn't even cry anymore. Her wedding night had become a nightmare she would never forget. The girl who once believed in love now stared at the golden ceiling of her royal prison, broken and alone. But no one outside knew the truth. Servants were ordered to stay silent. Doctors were paid to lie. She slipped, they said. She'll recover soon. But Nasiha knew nothing would ever be the same. The pain in her back was unbearable, but the pain in her heart was worse. The man she trusted had destroyed her, and now she was just another secret hidden behind royal walls. Still, the city celebrated. Feasts were thrown, songs were sung, and Nasiha remained locked away, a prisoner in a palace, broken by the very man she once dreamed of loving. The fairy tale was over, and in its place began a story of pain, silence, and betrayal. But deep inside her, even as her body failed her, something refused to die. A quiet fire started to burn. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, a question, a hunger. If love didn't save her, what would? She didn't know then, but this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Nasiha woke each day in agony, her back screaming with pain, her legs heavy like stone. But worse than the pain was the silence, the lies. Every time a doctor stepped into her room, she hoped for truth, for healing, for someone to say what really happened. But instead, they nodded, scribbled notes, and whispered about an unfortunate fall. Okuta paid them well, not to heal her, but to hide his crime. She got too excited on her wedding night, one smirked to a maid. She slipped and fell, another said. Their words were sharp knives that cut deeper than any wound. No one listened to her. Her voice was buried beneath Okuta's wealth and control. Her room, once filled with silk and flowers, became her prison. Curtains shut out the sun. Servants avoided her. Her cries were ignored. Even her parents, who had traveled so far to witness their daughter's royal future, were suddenly gone, sent back without explanation. No goodbyes, no answers, just silence. Rumors spread like wildfire. She's cursed. She brought shame to the palace. Maybe she bewitched the prince and got punished for it. She was stripped of everything, her name, her dignity, her future. Alone and forgotten, she lay still, watching the ceiling, counting the days, the cracks in the walls, the moments her body didn't respond. But inside her, something still breathed, a small ember of rage, a whisper of survival. Then, without warning, it ended. One cold morning before sunrise, palace guards rolled her onto a cart. No explanation, no kindness, just a scratchy blanket and silence. The wheels creaked over stone roads as the palace disappeared behind her. She couldn't move. She couldn't fight. She could only watch the sky turn blue with morning light and feel the cold wind slap her cheeks as the cart bounced away from everything she once believed in. By midday, she was dumped at the edge of Ikimi, a forgotten village where outcasts, widows, and the disabled were sent to disappear. A woman with a kind but tired face came forward and helped lift Nasiha onto a wooden mat. No one asked questions. No one mentioned the palace. They had seen this before. Broken bodies, shattered dreams. The royal family knew how to make people vanish. There, among strangers and silence, Nasiha was left. No title, no family, no hope, just a twisted spine, a burning mind, and a name no one dared speak. But even as she lay beneath a cracked roof with only rough soup to eat, something in her refused to die. She was not a queen, not anymore. She was not even a wife. She was the broken bride of a cruel prince, thrown away like trash. But she was still alive, and deep within her chest, behind the pain and betrayal, a storm was gathering. Akimi sat high in the misty hills, wrapped in silence and smoke. The air smelled like burnt wood, rusted iron, and forgotten dreams. It was where people sent those they no longer wanted, cripples, widows, orphans. Nasiha arrived in that quiet place with nothing but a broken back and shattered heart. She could barely lift her head when a Jori, an old warrior with one arm and deep scars on his face, carried her inside a tiny clay house. He said nothing, just nodded once and covered her with a warm wool cloth. His daughter, Luma, was nothing like him. She was fire. Her arms were strong, her eyes sharper than any blade she forged. A blacksmith by trade, she worked from sunrise to sunset, hammering steel with thunder in her fists. When she looked at Nasiha, there was no pity, no soft words, just a hammer in one hand and tools in the other. "Use your hands," she said. "Your spine is broken, not your soul." Nasiha cried in the dark for days, cried until her tears ran dry. No one came to comfort her. No one told her it would be okay. But Luma kept placing things in her lap. Small pieces of metal, charcoal for notes, scrolls full of sketches. At first, Nasiha pushed them aside, but one day she held a strip of copper in her palm and felt something. Not hope, not yet, but something close. She watched Luma work every day, eyes fixed on the rhythm of her hammer, the heat of the forge. Metal glowed, hissed, and bent under fire. Luma shaped it like it was alive. Nasiha began to notice the details, how the iron softened at the right temperature, how hinges needed balance, how pressure made things stronger. It fascinated her. When she asked about anatomy, Luma tossed her a scroll. It was dusty, old, but rich with drawings of bones, joints, muscle structures. She studied it for hours. She traced spines with her fingers. She learned where nerves flowed, where pain lived. Her mind was sharp, and it began to build something inside her, not just knowledge, but purpose. Ajori helped too. With his one arm, he showed her knots, pulleys, the secrets of support and weight. He didn't say much, but when he did, it mattered. Pain changes people, makes them soft, or makes them steel. One evening, long after the forge had cooled and the village was quiet, Nasiha sat outside under the stars, her legs still useless, but her mind racing with ideas. She looked at her hands, calloused and blackened with soot, and then at the scrap metal beside her. She whispered to herself, voice low but firm, "If I cannot walk, I will build a way to rise." She wasn't the cursed bride anymore. She was something else now, something forming in fire, silence, and steel. Nasiha started small. She held a hammer with trembling hands, her arms still weak, her body unsure. Luma stood beside her, arms crossed, watching in silence. She didn't offer praise. She didn't offer comfort, just more work. "Again," she said. "Hit it like it hurt you." And Nasiha did, again and again. Every strike of the metal was like a scream, every spark a tear burning away the past. Her body was broken, but her will, that was turning into something unshakable. With Luma's help, she began to shape something no one in Akimi had ever seen, a pair of iron braces. Not simple supports, but bold, beautiful things made of steel and soul. They wrapped around her legs like armor, locked at the knee, balanced by weight and tension. She shaped them with care, learning where the pain needed support, where the bones needed release. She studied herself, like a weapon being forged. The first time she tried to stand, the ground met her fast. Her elbows scraped, her breath left her chest, but she didn't cry. She gritted her teeth and tried again. The second time, her legs wobbled like newborn bamboo. The third time, she held the frame for just 2 seconds. The fifth, she held it longer. The 10th time, she stood without help. Her fingers clenched the iron bars. Her legs shook, but she was up. And by the 30th time, she stood tall. The village gathered around her, Children peered from behind huts. Elders came forward, their eyes wide. People who had once called her cursed now whispered a different word: miracle. She looked like a warrior, not a victim. Her iron braces gleamed in the sunlight, her hands rough and strong, her face calm but fierce. Then Nasiha smiled, a smile full of defiance, full of quiet thunder. She raised her voice and said, "I'm not healed, I'm rebuilt." The crowd went silent, as if they were witnessing something sacred. And in that silence, Nasiha turned to Luma and said the words that shocked everyone more than anything she'd done before. "Teach me how to fight." Luma's eyes narrowed. Then she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind a blade makes before it cuts. She handed Nasiha a wooden staff and said, "Tomorrow, we begin." From that day forward, Nasiha was no longer the broken bride dumped in Akimi. She was steel and flame. She had taken pain and turned it into power. And Akimi, once the place for forgotten souls, became her ground zero, the birthplace of her second life. She didn't walk like others. She marched in iron. Each step echoed louder than a drumbeat. The girl who couldn't walk now stood taller than ever, and the world had no idea what was coming next. Rain poured as if the sky itself was mourning, but inside the forge, fire danced. Nasiha moved like thunder, striking, swinging, stepping with her iron-clad legs that now felt like part of her soul. Her steel cane wasn't just for balance anymore. It had become a weapon, shaped to slice through air and bone alike. Luma trained her with no mercy. Every bruise was a lesson. Every drop of sweat carved her into a new form. A warrior. Word spread like wildfire. People from nearby villages came just to glimpse her. Some thought the stories were lies until they saw her. A woman who couldn't walk now moved with purpose and power. Her braces weren't hidden. They shined, sharp and proud. Children called her the lady with legs of war. Men who once pitied her now stepped aside in awe. Women whispered her name like prayer. She never smiled much. Her eyes stayed focused, but deep inside, a storm brewed, not of revenge alone, but of justice long denied. Then one night, during a heavy storm, a soaked merchant stumbled into Ekimi. He carried more than goods. He carried news. The villagers gathered around as he spoke. Okuta now controls half the eastern trade. He's richer than before, stronger. He's building warships, hundreds. He calls himself the Iron King. Silence fell. Nasiha didn't speak at first. She just stared into the fire, unmoving. Then her voice broke through like a blade. "The Iron King," she repeated. Her voice was low, calm, but every syllable felt like thunder rolling down the mountains. "No," she said, "that name belongs to me. He stole what he never built." Everyone turned to her, her fists clenched, her jaw locked. Then she looked at Luma. "I need armor," she said. "Not for battle, for war." Luma didn't argue. She simply nodded and opened the forge. For weeks, the sound of steel echoed across Akimi. Sparks lit the night. Nasiha molded plates of lightweight iron, painted with symbols of freedom. She crafted a cane blade that could shatter bones and pierce armor. Her braces were reshaped for speed and strength. Then came the day she stood at the edge of the village, wind howling through the valley. Children ran after her, waving. Elders placed hands on her shoulders, blessing her journey. Luma walked beside her to the path's end, eyes proud, but sad. "Remember," Luma said, "you're not going back to ask. You're going back to end it." Nasiha nodded. "I'm not the bride who left," she whispered. "I am the storm he never saw coming." And with that, she marched down the mountain. Each step sent echoes through the valley. Her iron feet struck the earth with purpose. And somewhere far away, in his palace of gold and lies, Okuta felt a chill crawl down his spine. The woman he broke was coming. And this time she wasn't just standing. She was rising to crush an empire. She rode into the outer city, draped in obsidian and crimson, with iron shining at her waist and fire in her eyes. Her hair was braided high like a crown, and her cane was polished steel, not just for walking, but for warning. She was no longer Nasiha, the broken bride. She was Lady Nahiri, the iron merchant whose name whispered through marketplaces like a spell. Nobody recognized her, not the guards at the gate, not the nobles in the chambers. Even the traders who sold her weapons bowed in ignorance, unaware that the woman they depended on was the same one they had discarded like ash. From a hidden forge in Akimi, she built an empire. Luma's blacksmithing became the foundation. Together, they trained others, warriors with broken limbs, widows with nowhere to go, orphans with eyes full of fire. They forged blades that did not rust, armor that bent but did not break. Their mark, an insignia of a mountain split by lightning, soon appeared on swords from Gwandara to Teko. Nobles paid in gold, soldiers fought with her iron, even Okuta's guards carried her weapon. Her business wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. And when her coins started circulating in royal coffers, when her materials built Okuta's own warships, she knew she had power again, not from pity, but from profit. She waited, patient as steel in a furnace. And then, when her trade sat like roots under Okuta's kingdom, she made her move. A velvet box was delivered to the palace with the seal of Lady Nahiri, by then a name that commanded respect. The servants carried it to Okuta's private chamber. Curious, he sliced the ribbon, opened the lid, and froze. Inside, resting on a bed of red silk, was a golden replica of a human spine, but it was cracked, right in the middle. His face drained of color. He clutched the edge of the table as silence swallowed the room. He knew. No one else understood, but he knew exactly who Lady Nahiri was. The spine was a message, not just revenge, a warning, a declaration. The woman he shattered had reforged herself. She had built a kingdom out of the ruins he left behind, and now, without lifting a sword, she held his empire in her palm. In the shadows of his palace, Okuta's power began to tremble, not from an army, but from a woman he once called property. The whispers grew louder in the city. Who is Lady Nahiri? She commands steel. She sends spines, and deep beneath the surface of Gwandara, the people began to remember the bride who vanished, the girl who cried, the woman who rose. They didn't know her name, but they felt her storm. Lady Nahiri had not returned for pity. She had returned with purpose, and the first crack in the Iron King's throne had just appeared. Okuta couldn't sleep. The palace that once echoed with pride now trembled with uncertainty. His empire, built on power and control, was slowly slipping from his fingers, and he didn't even know whose hands were taking it. The name, Lady Nahiri, was everywhere. Traders left his court for her coin. Blacksmiths refused his orders. Markets once loyal to him now bowed to her. His warships, built from what he thought was the finest steel, began to fail, cracking at sea, rusting too soon. His soldiers complained, his generals questioned. He sent spies. They returned silent or dead. He bribed merchants. They laughed in his face. Even his advisors warned him, whoever Lady Nahiri is, she's not someone we can fight the usual way. But Okuta was stubborn. He believed no woman could threaten him, not truly. To him, Nasiha was still a fragile bride with a broken body. He didn't see that the woman he'd tossed away had become the fire beneath the metal, now choking his rule. He thought she wanted gold, but her weapons were already in every hand. He thought she wanted power, but her influence was deeper than titles. The truth haunted him. She didn't want his throne. She wanted him to fall from it. Not just publicly, personally. In every corner of the city, the story spread like wildfire. The mysterious Lady Nahiri had once been wronged, discarded, left to rot, and now she ruled from the shadows. But her face remained hidden. Her name was a storm, but no one had seen her eyes. Until one day, it was a royal banquet, hosted by Okuta to show he was still in control. Nobles from far lands gathered, drums played, wine flowed. He smiled wide, pretending nothing was wrong. Then the room grew silent. The doors opened. A woman entered, dressed in black and red. Her cloak dragged behind her like a tide of smoke. On her legs were iron braces. Her cane tapped rhythmically on the marble floor. The guests moved aside, confused but curious. She walked straight to the throne. Okuta rose, unsure whether to command or collapse. She stopped only inches from him, pulled back her hood, and looked him in the eye. The room froze. It was her, Nasiha, but not the girl he remembered. Her eyes didn't cry anymore. They pierced. Her mouth didn't beg. It smirked. And her spine? It stood taller than his. He opened his mouth, but no words came. She leaned closer and said, "I didn't come to reclaim anything. I came so you could see the face of the empire you tried to break." He dropped into his seat, speechless, humiliated, and as she turned and walked away, her cane tapping like war drums, the nobles did not laugh. They bowed. To her, the girl he broke had returned not for revenge, but for a reckoning. And in that moment, Okuta knew he no longer ruled. The empire now bowed to the woman who once crawled. Lady Nahiri had risen, and she had made him kneel. The palace glittered like a starry sky that night, alive with music and laughter. Nobles in elaborate costumes spun around the ballroom, their faces hidden behind dazzling masks. This was no ordinary celebration. It was Okuta's desperate attempt to hold on to power, to show strength, and win back the loyalty slipping through his fingers. But no one expected the shadow that entered with a confident stride, dressed in black and gold, a mask forged from iron covering her face. Lady Nahiri moved through the crowd like a storm wrapped in silk. Ministers leaned in to hear her words. Generals nodded as she whispered secrets, and her gold coins changed hands faster than the flicker of candlelight. She was every eye's fascination and every rival's nightmare. No one guessed who she truly was. No one knew the broken girl behind the iron mask had come to claim what was hers. She danced with grace, every step a message, power, control, and a quiet warning. When she passed Okuta, her eyes glinted with cold fire. He barely recognized the woman in front of him. His loyal men accepted her gifts, their faces betraying confusion and greed. Slowly, Lady Nahiri weaved a web around the palace's most trusted men, winning their hearts with gold and promises. Then, as the music slowed, the grand hall quieted. All eyes turned toward the center, where Lady Nahiri stepped forward. With deliberate calm, she reached up and removed her iron mask. A collective gasp burst from the crowd. The ballroom fell into stunned silence. Okuta's face drained of color as he saw her. Nasiha, the girl he had broken, the bride he had discarded. But this was not the fragile woman he once knew. She stood tall, the iron braces on her legs hidden beneath a gown that shimmered like the night itself. And she smiled, not with weakness, but with the power of someone reborn. You can walk?" Okuta stammered, stepping back in disbelief. His voice cracked like a frightened child's. "No," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I rise." Her words cut deeper than any sword. She wasn't just walking. She was reclaiming, rebuilding, rising above every broken promise and shattered dream he left behind. "I didn't come back for love," she said, eyes locking with his. "I came for your throne." The nobles watched, spellbound. The man who once ruled with fear and cruelty now faced the woman he thought was destroyed. But Lady Nahiri was no longer a victim. She was a force, a queen forged by pain, iron, and fire. In that moment, the ballroom wasn't just a place of dance. It was the battlefield where power shifted, where the future of Gwandara would be rewritten. No one moved, no one spoke. Only the sound of her steady breathing filled the room as she stood, unmasked and unstoppable. The night was heavy with tension when Lady Nahiri stepped into the throne room, her presence commanding silence. In her hands, she held piles of papers, documents that would shatter Okuta's carefully built empire, bribes exchanged under the table, deals made in darkness, betrayals that had poisoned the kingdom, all laid bare for the world to see. The ministers who once bowed to Okuta's power now stared in disbelief, their loyalty crumbling as the truth burned through their lies. Whispers turned into shouts. The soldiers, those who had followed Okuta's orders without question, lowered their swords, eyes wide with shock and confusion. The crowd swelled, gathering closer around Nahiri, their voices rising in a single chant. "Iron Queen! Iron Queen!" The name echoed off the marble walls, a thunderous declaration that this was no longer Okuta's kingdom. Okuta's face paled, the weight of his crimes pressing down like a suffocating cloak. His power slipped through his fingers like sand, and when he tried to run, the guards, now loyal to Nahiri, blocked every escape. Cornered, the once feared ruler crumbled, collapsing onto the cold floor where he had once stood so proud. Naziri looked down at him with no trace of mercy, only the steady calm of justice served. "This is the floor you left me on," she said softly, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Now it's your turn." She ordered him to crawl, the act symbolic and brutal. On the very marble tiles where he had ruled with iron fists, Okuta began to drag himself, broken and humiliated. His cries echoed in the vast hall, sobs of regret, desperation, and shame. The man who had shattered a life now knew the taste of power stripped away. The courtiers watched, many unable to believe what they saw. The tyrant reduced to a crawling shadow, while the woman he tried to destroy stood tall, unstoppable, and victorious. It wasn't just punishment, it was a message to the entire kingdom. Cruelty and greed would no longer be tolerated. This was more than revenge, it was rebirth for the people. and a warning to those who thought power was theirs to abuse. Lady Nahiri, the broken bride turned Iron Queen, had crushed the empire built on pain, and as Okuta sobbed on the cold floor, the kingdom knew a new era had begun. After Okuta's fall, his world crumbled fast. The once mighty king was dragged from the palace and thrown into the harsh salt mines far from Gwandara. His luxurious home, filled with gold and secrets, was set ablaze, reduced to ashes that mirrored the ruin of his reign. No one mourned him. The people whispered that the empire built on cruelty could not stand. With his exile, Lady Nahiri stepped forward and dropped the mask. She revealed her true identity, Nasiha, the woman once broken, cast aside, and forgotten. But now, she was queen, and her rule was unlike anything Gwandara had ever seen. Nasiha ruled not with fear, but with fierce justice and a sharp mind for progress. She rebuilt the kingdom on foundations stronger than stone: trade, innovation, and steel. Her factories churned out weapons and tools that made her people proud and powerful. Instead of hoarding wealth, she invested in her people. She built hospitals where the wounded found care, not scorn. Her schools opened doors for girls who once dreamed quietly in shadows. Nasiha believed true power wasn't in throne rooms or armies, but in lifting others up. The iron braces she wore were displayed prominently in the palace, not as a trophy of pain, but as a symbol of survival and strength. Scars are not shame, a plaque beneath her braces read. They are symbols of survival and power. Her story inspired many. The woman who was left broken on her wedding night had risen higher than anyone imagined. She became both the most feared and the most loved ruler across the 7 kingdoms. Kings and queens who once mocked her now sought her counsel. Her name was whispered with respect and awe. She changed the way power was seen. It wasn't about ruling with an iron fist. It was about resilience, compassion, and courage. The quiet girl who suffered in silence was now the author of a new story, one of hope, justice, and unstoppable will. Her rise reminded everyone never to mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes those who seem broken are simply gathering strength. They don't come back for petty revenge. They come back to rewrite the future as its true author. Nasiha's throne was built not from gold or fear, but from the rubble of an empire that had forgotten the meaning of true power. She showed the world that even the deepest wounds could heal and become the strongest armor. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that true strength comes from rising after the hardest falls, then remember, no matter how broken you feel today, you have the power to rebuild your life and rewrite your story. Nasiha's journey shows us that scars don't make us weak, they make us warriors. When life tries to break you, fight back with everything you have. Your silence does not mean defeat. It might just be the calm before your greatest comeback. If you believe in the power of resilience and want to see more inspiring stories that celebrate courage, justice, and hope, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Your support helps us bring more stories that empower and uplift. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that can change your life. Together, we can build a community of strength and hope, reminding each other that even in the darkest times, a brighter future is possible. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this journey. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and always remember, you are not alone. Your story is waiting to be told, and your power is waiting to be unleashed. Keep rising.